Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Lilith. So this Daily Run I would say was pretty good, and this is something I don't really say that often, especially not on a character that's as weird or maybe as unusual as Lilith is, and I don't mean weird in a bad way, just I mean weird in a sense that you can't really know her place. You can tell, is she a strong character, is she a weak character, and in some instances of course what I usually say is that if you have a bad run on Lilith, it usually would be made better if you were playing any other character, and the same goes for any good run. If you have a good run, it would be made better on any other character. So in that sense, Lilith doesn't really have a sense of identity. You would think that familiars maybe are a sense of identity for her, but in majority of cases that's not really true. You just have a good run or maybe even a bad one, and it usually doesn't rely on your familiars that you find throughout the run, just because so many familiars I would say are practically useless, but it depends on maybe some other external sources. But what this run does show and prove is that it's possible to actually have a run that relies on your familiars, in this case namely Incubus, and the majority of that reason is due to BFF, and BFF works extremely well, and not only because it essentially increases the damage of every single familiar you pick up, but also because when you have the box of friends, you also double that initial damage boost. And I'm not really sure how the formula for BFF works, maybe it just doubles the initial damage, maybe it's like a static increase on every familiar, but what I do know is that it makes Incubus in particular just a lot more powerful, and it does really allow you to kind of go through the rooms, and our damage at this point is practically through the roof, and maybe it doesn't seem that way because it's only at 4, we only picked up the Fat Odd Mushroom, but because of BFF we're actually doing a much more substantial amount of damage than it maybe seems on the first glance. And of course this is something that I think is unique to Lilith. If you pick up BFF on any other character, because obviously you don't have any familiars, or maybe even if you did pick up Little Steven, it just wouldn't work the same way, and for that reason I feel like this is the run which I would say really distinguishes Lilith as a character that is reliant on her familiars, or maybe more of an Incubus than anything else, and maybe something else entirely, and this is what I feel like is a perfect Lilith run. Not only do you have something really strong, but it's made stronger by the fact you're Lilith, and it's not made stronger by the fact that you just have a lot of good items, which would be better on another character. I hope I'm making any sense. At this point I feel like I may be blabbering a bit, but I'm just trying to say that I'm really glad that we have a run where I can actually express myself when I'm playing as Lilith, and the fact I can actually rely on my familiars to do most of the work for me. But even beyond that, I would say that this run had a lot of interesting consequences in just the items we picked up, and there are a few items which obviously don't really work with Lilith, but there's also a few items which work extremely well with Lilith, and this is something I never really mentioned or brought up, mainly because whenever I see it, I mentally block that item from my head. And what I'm talking about here is Cursed Eye. And you would say, why bring Cursed Eye into this? Isn't that like one of the worst items in the game? And you would be right in pretty much 99% of scenarios. But when you're playing as Lilith, and if you don't have like a very general way of shooting, if you pick that item up, it essentially triples your damage on Lilith. And that sounds crazy to some extent, and it is, because nobody would really expect it to work this way. But with how it works, essentially, because you're not shooting from your own tiers, you don't have to charge it up anymore, and for some reason, every time you shoot, instead of just shooting once, you actually shoot the triple amount of shots, as if the Cursed Eye was fully charged. So you're just dealing triple amount of damage when you pick that item up, and that is something that I feel like if people knew more about, it would definitely change the course of the run in most cases, and this is exactly what happened now. You can see that the tiers that I'm actually shooting now, I'm just producing so many more of them, and they're just so much more potent and damaging because they come in very clustered rows that most enemies just instantly die with one hit. And when I get Sacred Heart, I think in this angel room, yep, that's it, then I have nothing to worry about. I can just enter a room, I shoot 9 shots at once because of the triple shot, and each shot deals 16 damage, and that's pretty much enough to one-shot most enemies, if not even bosses. And of course the fact is I still have only 16 tier delay, so my tier shots are actually extremely quick, and I'm just dealing a ridiculous amount of damage. So at this point I knew that my run was pretty much safe. There's really nothing to worry about beyond this. We even have a lot of, I would say, swag bonuses, or maybe ways to get more consumables via, of course, the sack boy, but also the sack of coins and the sack of bombs. All of those actually do help us. And in the case of the boss rush, we even got a Book of Shadows. And because we have the car battery, and this is maybe something again that a lot of people don't know, but if you have a car battery and just any shield effect, I would say, they actually stack. So if you use a shield effect that lasts for 2 seconds and another one that lasts for 5 seconds, they actually stack to make a shield that lasts 7 seconds. And in this case, of course, every time you use the Book of Shadows, it actually gets used up twice, and for that reason you actually get double the usage out of it. So that allows us not only to demolish the bosses by getting in there close and personal with our Incubus and of course our Bowl of Bandages as well, But also every time we get another charge, we can use it again, and as a result, we're pretty much invincible for the entirety of boss rush without ever risking getting hit. And of course, in the first place, I picked up car battery just to have more consumables and more familiars when I use my box of friends, so actually I'm not only shooting 9 shots at the time, but I'm actually shooting like 27, and of course you can imagine just how ridiculous that can get, especially when you have a combo as powerful as this one. I mainly wanted it for Hush. Obviously, every time you use a box of friends, you're only gonna get a benefit for one particular room, but essentially, if you think about it, you triple the damage output you would have against that particular room, and against Harsh, that can be extremely detrimental and extremely important if you actually just want to get through it as fast as possible and maybe ignore some of the harder stages, like when he ducks underground or whatever. It really does pay off just to have a lot more offensive punch so you can actually get rid of those enemies that he spawns, because that makes him, I would say, act a little bit more predictably, and that does, of course, reduce the chances of you getting hit as you're actually trying to go through the fight. And of course, as we're going through the run here, there's really nothing much to worry about. We're just looking out for consumables, maybe we're trying to pick something up. I hope maybe at a certain point I would get the book for information. I think I picked up 2 books up until this point, but obviously that's a pipe dream and not really all that important in the whole scheme of things. We're just really doing a crazy, ridiculous amount of damage as soon as we enter the room. I also decided to pick up Spirit of the Night, which might seem a bit controversial because at first I'm giving up an angel room chance. For that reason, I can go back to angel rooms as soon as I pick up a devil item. Of course, I lose all of my angel precedent, if that makes sense. So I can go back and blow up the statues and get more points that way. But I felt like the safety I get from Spirit of the Night is gonna give me more than I'm bargaining for. Maybe if you look at it, I'm losing like 500 or 600 points by actually not going the angel route, by picking up the Spirit of the Night in the first place. But what I'm gaining is a lot of safety and a lot of, I would say, mobility to maybe walk over creep or spikes, or just, I would say, shoot over the walls and the rocks, so I'm really not in any danger when I'm trying to deal with enemies. And because a single hit at this point would cost me something like 400 or maybe even 500 points, I feel like the bargain in that sense was worth it, because I'm essentially trading points that I would potentially get for the safety in this moment, and I feel like for that reason it was the right decision. So I did skip the void because it was, I would say, very monotonous, just mainly me walking in the room and instantly one-shotting it. And in the end, we're fighting Mr. Fred here. I duplicate it, and you can just see how much of an offensive punch my tears have. So at this point, of course, I exit the run. I pick up some bombs and coins that are on the ground just to maybe get a little bit more points. I exit the run at 51,000 and almost 500 points, which ranks me in the number 6 spot. I think I was like number 5 or top 5 on the grid of leaderboards. Of course, there are a lot of people who actually found a way to break this one. They reduced their item penalty, they got a lot more swag, so 7,000 points more in that regard, but also used the Forget Me Now to do the whole of the void floor again. So you're looking at like an 11,000 point discrepancy there, which I could have potentially gotten if I actually found all of the breaking items in some regard, and I feel like I could have done that because there was an Ivy bag at a certain point, and maybe you do something with that and get some more shenanigans, but it really did work out for the best, I feel. We got a lot of points in all regards, we didn't skip up many secret or second secret runes, and to the end we basically beat every single boss in the entirety of the void, we visited every room, and we only managed to get hit a few times, and our damage penalty is just extremely low as a result of that. So overall, a really strong run, a really good one. I feel like I really played pretty decently all in all, and I always feel like that's exciting to share with you. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.